Oh my goodness. The king is going to remove the title of prince from his brother, Prince Andrew. The king has also told him to move out of his 30-room mansion Royal Lodge in Windsor. Why is this happening? It is a great question. It's happening because 2 weeks ago, Virginia Giuffre, here in this picture is a 17-year-old young woman. Her book was released, which alleged the horrific abuse she suffered at the hands of Jeffrey Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell, who's in this photograph, and also Prince Andrew. She says she was sexually abused 3 times on 3 separate occasions by
Just 7 minutes ago, the United Kingdom held its collective breath as Prince William stepped before the press with trembling hands and tear-brimmed eyes. What followed was not just a royal statement, it was a heartbreaking revelation that shattered the illusion of control behind palace walls. This wasn't mere rumor, this was the truth confirmed by the future king himself, and it changes everything. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. The moment Prince William appeared outside Clarence House, the world knew something wasn't right. There was no pomp, no carefully choreographed protocol, just raw, visible distress. His voice cracked as he began, his words struggling to push past the weight of what he had to say. "It is with deep sadness that I must confirm." And with that, the illusion crumbled. King Charles III, his father, the monarch who only recently celebrated a reign forged in late succession, was gravely unwell. William didn't speak in vague, rehearsed statements. He spoke like a son, wounded, panicked, cornered. He revealed that Charles had been suffering in silence, his health deteriorating due to a series of aggressive and overlapping medical conditions that had worsened rapidly in the past few weeks. The royal household had kept it hidden, allegedly to avoid panic, but now the facade could no longer be maintained. Within seconds, news outlets halted programming, phones buzzed, notifications exploded, and across the UK, public spaces, homes, and offices, people stood still. The image of William's pale, grief-hardened face flashed across every screen. The future of the monarchy, of Britain itself, felt suddenly uncertain. What shocked many wasn't just the revelation, it was how long this truth had been withheld. According to internal sources, royal staff were only informed 24 hours before the public. Even senior aides were blindsided. Reports suggest an urgent overnight briefing was conducted behind closed doors, where William made the personal decision to go public against palace advisors' wishes. But perhaps the most unsettling detail of all was who wasn't present. Camilla, the queen consort, whose proximity to the king is usually constant during times of royal pressure, was nowhere to be seen. Her absence sent shockwaves through observers. Whispers began immediately. Was she distancing herself? Was she kept out? Or was she part of the delay? Still reeling, the public grasped onto one chilling phrase William uttered: "Time is no longer on our side." A line that wasn't just honest, it was ominous. It suggested urgency, finality, and perhaps something far worse just beyond the veil. And as the world tried to understand the magnitude of what had just unfolded, one question thundered louder than the rest. Why had this all been hidden for so long? Why now? What forced William's hand? But what exactly is wrong with King Charles, and why was this kept secret until now? The answers lie in a trail of silenced doctors, private palace meetings, and one fateful hospital report. Behind Buckingham Palace's polished facade, a confidential medical report was circulated in sealed envelopes, its contents so devastating it never left the hands of senior royals. But now we uncover the report that forced William to speak out. The diagnosis was not recent, it was buried months ago, and now it may be too late. For those closest to the monarchy, the truth had been quietly looming long before the public heard a word. The report, marked with the king's initials and classified under the highest level of royal confidentiality, contained findings that went beyond mere concern. Physicians documented signs of an aggressive neurological disorder, one known for its rapid cognitive decline, paired with emerging cardiac complications that had begun affecting the king's daily functionality. To most, Charles appeared steady, even vigorous, but inside his body was betraying him. The turning point came during a private retreat at Birkhall in Scotland. Charles, against medical advice, insisted on attending a ceremonial woodland event. What followed was a collapse, quiet, unreported, but deeply alarming. He lost consciousness for several minutes. Those who witnessed it were sworn to silence, but it triggered an internal alarm throughout the royal network. That incident marked the moment everything began to shift. His longtime personal physician, a figure who had treated Charles through decades of minor ailments, was reportedly removed just days after urging that the king step away from public duties until further tests were completed. No official explanation was provided. Internally, however, it was seen as a silencing. His removal was swift, quiet, and final. Weeks later, in the stillness of a London night, a select group gathered in the palace's private library. Only 4 royals were present: William, Anne, Edward, and the Duchess of Edinburgh. The Queen Consort was conspicuously absent. What was discussed has never been disclosed officially, but whispers suggest they were presented with the complete findings for the first time.
What Anne reportedly said that night still echoes within the palace halls. "We've been walking on a crumbling bridge." Camilla, by then, had reportedly begun working behind the scenes to manage the optics. Sources allege she advised the palace press office to divert public attention by focusing on royal charity milestones and international engagements. Internally, she is said to have questioned the necessity of sharing the full extent of the king's condition, suggesting it would weaken the institution. But actions speak louder than any press statement. The medical wing within Buckingham Palace, unused for years, was abruptly and quietly renovated. Medical teams were brought in under private contracts. New secure entrances were built. One source, an aide of nearly 2 decades, claimed they'd never seen that level of controlled movement around the royal quarters. It was clear the palace was preparing for something grim. Still, this careful orchestration couldn't hold forever. Documents can be locked away, people silenced, but truth has a way of clawing to the surface, especially when someone inside can no longer bear the burden of secrets. And yet, for all the secrecy, someone within the palace couldn't stay silent. A whistleblower stepped forward and triggered a chain reaction no one could stop. In the shadows of royal protocol, one voice rose above fear. A senior medical staffer named Winsor Nightingale risked everything to expose the truth. Her testimony would be the match that ignited a firestorm and forced Prince William into the spotlight. She had been part of the royal medical team for nearly a decade, trusted, discreet, and invisible by design. But what she witnessed in the weeks following the king's collapse broke through her decades of loyalty. It wasn't just the diagnosis, it was the deliberate effort to delay treatment. According to internal records, multiple surgery consultations were rescheduled, each time under pressure from palace aides, citing optics and timing. The most critical procedure, meant to alleviate a dangerous arterial blockage, was postponed indefinitely. She compiled a memo, clinical, detailed, and damning, but she didn't stop there. A voice recording, later authenticated by investigators, captured a senior advisor instructing medical staff to wait until the coronation milestone passes before moving forward with Charles's next treatment phase. That line alone sent shockwaves through those who heard it. And yet, the recording never made it to the public, not right away. The whistleblower was soon labeled a security risk. Her clearance was downgraded. Within days, she disappeared from palace rosters entirely. Colleagues were instructed not to contact her. Some believe she left the country under protection. Others claimed she was quietly silenced through internal channels. No one could confirm her whereabouts, but what no one knew until now was that she had left something behind. Buried deep in Charles's medical folder, behind outdated X-rays and routine charts, was her final act of defiance, the memo. William found it during a late-night review of his father's condition. The handwriting was familiar, the content was devastating. It was the moment everything changed for him. Reading the memo wasn't just a revelation, it was a betrayal. William realized the extent to which the palace machinery had worked against transparency, against his father's recovery, against truth. He knew then that staying silent would make him complicit. This was no longer about preserving image, it was about preserving integrity. He confronted Charles the next morning, alone. What transpired between them has not been revealed, but within 48 hours, William stood before the world and told the truth. Not just about his father's condition, but about the system that failed him and the voice that tried to stop it. Tabloids began picking up whispers of the whistleblower, dubbing her the angel in scrubs. But the mainstream press, long wary of royal retaliation, hesitated to publish the full story, until now. Her actions, once buried in palace silence, are finally seeing the light. But even as truth spilled out, another storm was already brewing, this time inside the family, and Camilla was right at the center of it. As the nation reels from William's statement, insiders whisper about the queen consort's role in concealing the king's deteriorating condition. Some say she was protecting him, others believe she was protecting herself. But what is now clear, Camilla knew more than she ever let on. Behind the gilded doors of the palace, a quiet storm had been raging for weeks. According to senior aides, Camilla had been orchestrating an internal campaign to control the narrative. When Charles collapsed during the retreat at Birkhall, it wasn't just the king who was shielded from exposure, it was the institution itself. Camilla allegedly ordered communication staff to manage the optics, a phrase now being dissected by royal watchers with surgical precision. Instead of immediate disclosure, a press release was drafted highlighting Charles's commitment to sustainability, entirely omitting his medical emergency. Sources within the communications team later revealed that Camilla made it clear no public acknowledgement of the king's health would be made until after her coronation anniversary. That celebration, carefully planned and symbolically significant for Camilla's public standing, had become her personal milestone. Any disruption to it, especially one involving the king's incapacitation, was considered, in her words, an unacceptable distraction. Tensions between William and Camilla had already been simmering, but last week they erupted. William reportedly stormed out of a senior briefing after learning that key dates on Charles's public calendar, meetings, ceremonial appearances, even a foreign dignitary reception, had been confirmed by Camilla without medical clearance. It was later discovered that several of these engagements had been altered to pre-recorded formats, giving the illusion of live participation while Charles remained confined to his private quarters. This deception pushed Princess Anne to take action. In a private confrontation at Balmoral, she demanded Camilla come clean, not just to the family, but to the nation. Anne, known for her discipline and duty, was reportedly furious and accused Camilla of placing legacy above life. The meeting ended in silence, and Camilla left Balmoral earlier than scheduled. Within the palace, this chapter has been given a chilling name: the Camilla Blockade. Not coined by tabloids, but whispered by those inside. Staffers began documenting incidents in coded memos, and internal dissent quietly built behind closed doors. Camilla's inner circle tightened, William's trust fractured, and in the background, Charles's condition grew more precarious. But perhaps the most revealing moment came just hours before William's press address.
As he reviewed documents and prepared to reveal the truth to the world, a palace courier handed him a sealed envelope, one not from Camilla, not from aides, but from Charles himself. The envelope bore no insignia, no formal seal, only a note for William, read alone. But Camilla's interference wasn't the only betrayal. As William prepared to face the cameras, he learned of another secret the king had drafted, a private letter meant only for him. Sealed in his father's handwriting, the letter delivered to William just hours before the press statement was nothing short of a farewell. More than a message, it was a confession, a plea, and a final wish for the crown's future. The letter arrived not through official protocol, but by the hand of Charles's personal valet. Trusted, discreet, and visibly shaken, he handed it to William with only 7 words. He said, "You must read this alone." For a brief moment, William hesitated. The weight of what he was about to uncover hung heavy. He retreated into the stillness of a locked room, opened the letter, and faced words that would shatter him to the core. Charles had written not as a king, but as a father, staring down mortality. The letter began with an almost apologetic tone, acknowledging that much had been left unsaid between them. Then the truth came pouring out. Charles admitted what William had long suspected, that his greatest fear was not death, but irrelevance. He feared being remembered not as a monarch who changed the course of history, but as a transitional figure, one who simply held the line until the next generation took over. "They will call me the space between legends," he wrote, "and I have no one to blame but myself." What followed was a raw confession of regret. Charles spoke openly of missed moments, especially the delays that in hindsight cost him time he could never recover. He referenced political decisions, personal choices, and the burden of image that had always clouded authenticity. "Every delay," he wrote, "felt like caution at the time. Now it feels like cowardice." But the letter wasn't just sorrow, it was a call to action. Charles urged William to embrace the role, not as a burden, but as a bold declaration. "Lead without apology," he wrote. "Even when the past still haunts you, step forward. Because one day the world won't wait for us to be ready." In those lines, Charles was passing more than power, he was passing purpose. Then came the most cryptic and haunting revelation. Charles mentioned a sealed archive unknown to even his closest advisors, a collection of letters, documents, and personal records he had assembled over decades. The contents, he wrote, were only to be opened if he failed to recover. "Inside is the legacy I couldn't speak aloud," he warned. What that archive holds remains a mystery, one William has yet to confront. The letter ended with a line that William would later echo word for word in his public address. "If I fall, you rise. It must be you." Not a suggestion, not a hope, a command, a legacy sealed in ink. But rising would not be so simple. As William faced his destiny, another royal figure emerged from the shadows with an ultimatum of her own. While the public fixated on William's heartbreak, Princess Anne was moving behind palace walls. A war room was formed, a plan set in motion. If Charles were to step down or pass away, suddenly Anne would not allow the monarchy to fall into disarray. Anne had always been the unshakable spine of the royal family, discreet, dutiful, and unrelenting. But in this moment of chaos, she became something more, a strategist. As the headlines circled around William's emotional statement and speculation devoured the media cycle, Anne initiated what insiders now call a monarchical containment protocol. A private council was summoned under strict discretion, deliberately excluding Camilla. Those present were hand-picked: Prince Edward, the Duke of Edinburgh, his wife Sophie, and Zara Tyndall, the daughter Anne trusts like an extension of herself. Notably absent was Prince Harry. According to sources, he was invited formally and privately, but he declined.
His refusal, while unsurprising, drew a sharp line in the sand. Whatever was to happen next, it would be without him. Inside the secured estate chamber, the group laid out scenarios not discussed in public, ones too devastating to admit aloud. What if Charles couldn't return to public life? What if he slipped into permanent incapacity? What if the monarchy faced another sudden transition without warning? These were no longer hypotheticals. They were looming realities, and they required decisive answers. A contingency plan was drafted that evening. It detailed a temporary support structure to bolster William should he be forced to assume power sooner than expected. More than symbolic, it was tactical. Each royal in attendance accepted a new role, quiet, direct, and immediate. Zara would serve as the family's public liaison in the media storm. Edward would oversee constitutional matters. Sophie, already beloved by the public, would support Catherine's position in the shadows of rising scrutiny. One of the more shocking revelations was a file Anne pulled from her personal archive, documents showing she had been preparing for this moment since September. Quietly, methodically, she had anticipated the silence, the delays, the deflections, and had begun drafting scenarios the palace refused to address. Her foresight, once seen as unnecessary caution, now became the royal family's only lifeline. The meeting ended not with ceremony, but with resolve. As William prepared for a future he never asked for, Anne took his hand, looked him squarely in the eye, and spoke words he would carry into the next chapter. "This is your moment," she told him, "but I won't let you do it alone." But what no one expected was that Charles would make a surprise move that same evening, defying doctors and summoning the entire family for a final declaration. The clock struck midnight, and every royal was summoned to Sandringham under a code monarch alert. Charles, weakened but resolute, sat in full regalia. What followed was not a farewell, but a royal reckoning. It was a move no one saw coming. Despite his failing health and doctors urging continued rest, King Charles defied every medical directive and issued a direct summons to his immediate family. The message was simple: arrive tonight, no excuses. The tone left no room for negotiation. Even palace officials appeared shaken by the king's abrupt command. This wasn't a ceremonial gathering, it was a moment of reckoning forged in illness, pride, and fear. Inside Sandringham's ancient walls, Charles sat not as a patient, but as a monarch, preparing for his final war. He wore his sash, his signet, and a determination that pierced through the weakness in his body. When the family arrived, Anne, Edward, William, Sophie, and even a reluctant Camilla, there was no embrace, no pleasantries. Charles opened with a voice that cracked with weight. "What I say tonight, I say as your king and your father." He confirmed what William had already told the world, that his condition was severe but not surrendering. Then came a stunning declaration. He had no intention of stepping down, not yet. "I will fight," he said, "not for survival, but for legacy." The words landed like thunder. Charles knew time was short, but he wasn't prepared to fade. He would fight to preserve what he had waited a lifetime to inherit. The crown, he insisted, could not be handed over in fear. His gaze scanned the room. He spoke of mistakes, decisions that fractured relationships and silenced truths. "I have failed some of you," he said, looking directly at Anne. "But this moment demands more than regret. It demands resolve." He called for unity, not only in image but in spirit. There would be no factions, no whisper campaigns, no palace coups disguised as PR damage control. "We stand or fall together," he declared. When Camilla attempted to speak, perhaps to defend her recent actions, Charles raised his hand. Silence. The gesture was not cruel, it was final. The queen consort, for the first time, was publicly overruled by the king himself. Then came his final message, one that stunned even the most stoic members of the family. Charles, his voice barely above a whisper, looked to William and uttered 6 words that would later be repeated across news outlets, opinion pieces, and royal historians for generations to come.
It was never supposed to happen this way, not so soon, not under this kind of pressure. But William, standing in the very place where generations of royal duty had been sworn, rose to the moment. His voice, steady but strained, echoed a message that redefined the future of the monarchy before clergy, officials, and a stunned nation. He announced a temporary reduction of his royal duties, not to distance himself from responsibility, but to remain by his father's side during what he called this most sacred and uncertain chapter. But this was more than a gesture of devotion. It was a powerful statement of values. William declared that while his father remained the crown's heartbeat, he would preserve the soul of the crown while its heart still beats. The phrase, written personally by William, would soon become etched into global headlines. It wasn't just poetic, it was a challenge to a system that for too long had chosen silence over truth, image over humanity. In an unprecedented move, William announced sweeping reforms, chief among them royal medical transparency. For the first time in modern history, the monarchy would adopt protocols that ensured the public would no longer be left in the dark during times of health crisis. "We must break the pattern of secrecy," he said, "because silence in moments like these is a form of betrayal." It was a direct rebuke of the tradition that had hidden Charles's condition for so long. He then turned to Princess Anne, not only as his aunt, but as his most trusted ally. In a powerful symbolic act, he officially designated her as royal steward in the event that a succession emergency should occur. The role, drafted under a new parliamentary agreement known as the Guardian Protocol, gave Anne temporary power to oversee state matters should Charles become incapacitated and William unable to assume the throne immediately. Parliament approved it unanimously, a rare show of political unity in service of the crown's stability. Then came a moment of haunting significance. Slipped on William's finger, not by ritual, but by resolve, was Queen Elizabeth's personal ring. It had not been worn since her passing. This wasn't just jewelry, it was memory, legacy. A mother's weight passed to a grandson who now bore the burden of both past and future. And with that, William bowed his head, not to the people, but to the task ahead. The ceremony was brief, the message eternal. William had not claimed the throne, but he had claimed the path forward. His oath wasn't just about duty, it was about redefining what royalty meant in the face of crisis, truth, and humanity. But just as calm began to settle, a letter surfaced in the press, one that no one was meant to see. Not from Charles, not from William, but from Diana. Long thought destroyed, a handwritten note by Princess Diana has surfaced, addressed to my darling boys. What it contains will leave you speechless, a warning, a fear, and a prophecy fulfilled too late. The letter was uncovered during a private estate audit following the passing of Diana's former butler. Tucked within a sealed envelope, buried in a weathered leather journal, was a note she had written nearly 3 decades ago. It was never meant for the world. Its edges were frayed, but its words, sharp, haunting, and eerily prescient, cut straight through the silence of time. Addressed to William and Harry, the note was undated, but signed in Diana's unmistakable cursive. Its message wasn't just of affection alone, it was a warning. Diana wrote of a future she feared, one where illness and ambition will clash inside the crown. At the time, many assumed her words were born from emotional wounds or palace paranoia. But now, in the wake of Charles's health crisis and the turmoil surrounding the monarchy, those same words read like prophecy. She spoke of a quiet sickness and a reluctance to speak truth until it is too late. One chilling line read, "He hides more than he admits, and he always has." What stopped the nation cold, though, was not her concern for Charles, but for William. Diana feared he would inherit the burden before he inherits the strength, a line now being dissected by commentators, royal watchers, and historians alike. Was she referring to a forced early succession, a premature rise to the throne, or simply the emotional toll of carrying a crown carved in silence? In the final lines, her words softened, then deepened. "When the world turns its eyes to you, don't forget to breathe," she wrote. "The crown is heavy, but you are not alone." It wasn't just advice, it was a mother's final embrace, written in ink and heartbreak. The letter was authenticated by multiple experts. Its paper matched the stationery Diana used in the early 1990s. The handwriting was verified. The palace, when asked for comment, declined entirely. No denials, no statements, just silence. And so, with a nation watching, a family grieving, and a crown trembling, Prince William stands not just in his father's shadow, but on the edge of destiny itself. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in the next video.